Welcome to the screencast for our MTSS intervention in Fluency. First, we will begin with background information on page 1 in your intervention. Fluency is the ability to read smoothly, easily, and free of word recognition problems. You'll see that definition throughout the intervention. Disfluency is characterized by a slow pace, frequent mistakes, and poor phrasing with inadequate expression. Occasionally, fluency is characterized by a pace that is too fast. Fluent readers can better comprehend the text and identify unknown words. With fluency, rate is not the only thing that you're looking for, and faster is not always better. There are 4 elements to fluency: phrasing, rhythm of speech, pace and rate, and expression. We'll talk about those 4 elements in depth later on. Rereading text helps improve students' fluency, word recognition, and comprehension. Remembering with rereading that you make this motivational for the students. Try different lighting. Try a different audience member, whether it's a younger student or a stuffed animal or a fish. Try it in a different voice. Make sure with rereading that students don't get bored, but that they're motivated to read more and more. How fluency is developed. Fluency is developed when the student hears fluent reading by an adult, when the student starts to learn to focus on expression while reading instead of just word recognition, phonics, and isolated skills. Fluency is developed when students have lots of opportunities to read and develop this skill. And finally, fluency is developed when students are reading text at his or her instructional and independent level. On page 2 in your MTSS intervention document, you'll find the table of contents. On page 3, you'll find our district-created fluency interventions. Our goal, which is to have students be able to read fluently, which is accurately, smoothly, at a good pace, and with expression, those 4 elements. Materials you'll need: any text that is at their instructional or independent reading level. Some examples might be old Harcourt text, reading A to Z, familiar rereads, journal notebooks, fluency texts, guided reading books, poetry, and any materials under the Fluency tab in Reading A to Z. Each time that you meet, it'll take you about 15 to 20 minutes per day. The grouping should be 2nd to 5th graders, with flexible grouping ranging from anything to individual to a small group, definitely no more than 4 students. And remember, weekly progress monitoring assessments need to be done individually every week. How do you determine which students need the fluency intervention? You will want to look at district assessments, as well as Kansas State assessment, and any QRIs or IRIs that have been read orally by the student. You'll want to go look at the fluency rubric on page 5 and see if the student falls below the average of 3 in any of those 4 elements, with a word accuracy of 95% or higher. If the student's reading at a 90% word accuracy or lower, you might want to go look at the phonics or high frequency word interventions, depending on the type of errors. Utilize the information from the universal screening. Focus on the areas then of the fluency rubric that the students fall below a 3. How will you know if students are improving? You will use those weekly progress monitoring sheets at the student's instructional level, which might not be their grade level. You'll be doing these weekly, and you'll need lots of different materials so that you can accurately progress monitor students' improvement. We'll talk about those materials needed a little bit later. The different fluency intervention tiers. There are 3 tiers. Tier 1 at the bottom of the page is what you're doing already for all students to help improve their fluency. Tier 2 includes 4 different interventions, and Tier 3 has 2 interventions. Tier 2 and Tier 3 lessons are for targeted students only in one-on-one settings or in a small group. Also remember, when beginning the Fluency intervention, that you will always start with a student introduction to Fluency on page 10 in your documents. Here is that Fluency rubric that I mentioned earlier. You will score students on a scale of 1 to 5 in these 4 elements when they are reading weekly, but also as a baseline. 1s and 2s mean that they are struggling and do not understand this concept and they can't generalize it into their reading. 3s are average. 4s and 5s means they understand this concept and are reading most of the time with good phrasing, rhythm of speech, pace and rate, expression and intonation. The way that you progress monitor fluency is by having students read orally to you every week. And to do so, you will need the following materials. You'll need a hardcore oral reading fluency passage, or ORF passage, found on the district MTSS website under Fluency. You'll have 2 copies of this. One, the student will read and will be unnumbered. And then there'll be a teacher recorder form of this same passage that you will use, that you will mark errors and also be able to record the number of words they read correctly. You'll need the Fluency rubric that we just looked at so that you can refer back to that 1 through 5 scale. You'll need to know the district curricular grade level expectations of oral reading rates that's on page 9. You'll also need the progress monitoring chart to record this data. And you'll need a stopwatch or timer so that each recording only takes 1 minute. Remember, the unnumbered copy will be in front of the student and the teacher recorder form will be in front of you where students cannot see it as you write and record how they're reading. Here's where you will find those ORF passages on the district website. Under the Fluency intervention, you will go down to the progress monitoring passages that are to be used weekly. Remember, this is not necessarily their grade level, but this is their instructional or independent reading level. The ORF passages will look like this. This is just an example of a first grade ORF passage. Max on the left would be the student copy where it is clean and has no numbers along the right-hand side. The teacher recorder form is on the right. It will have the grade level and it will also have the number of words up to that point on the right-hand side. Do remember that they include the title in the total words read. So please do not read the title to the students. So as you see, max plus max can go up is 5 words. So that's 5, not just 4 that starts at the passage. Here are the instructions when you begin an ORF passage. I won't read you all the directions, but it just points it out to say exactly what you should be telling the student and how you also monitor. There are a few differences between monitoring fluency and a running record. Number 1, if the student mispronounces a proper name, you will pronounce it for him and mark it as an error. If they continue to mispronounce the same proper name after you've pronounced it, do not count it as an error, so it's only an error 1 time. Number 2, if a student stops or struggles with a word after 3 seconds, you may tell them the word. You mark it as incorrect and put a T above it so that we know that you told the student that word. And also this is timed. So at the end of 1 minute, you're going to stop the student and you will place a bracket after the last word they read. And here's how you score the student. You're going to count the total number of words the student read in 1 minute. You're going to record this number as total words read, TWR. Count the number of reading errors the students made, and then subtract the number of reading errors from the TWR. Record this number now as the total words read correctly. Finally, you're also going to score the students on a scale of 1 to 5 on all of the 4 elements of fluency that we discussed on the fluency rubric on page 5. Here's an example of a progress monitoring chart that you will have for each student in the fluency intervention. You will have not only the date, what ORF passage they are reading, grade and title, total words read correctly, what intervention you completed, number of lessons, lesson format, whether it's in a fluency group or in addition to a small group, and then the 4 elements of fluency scored on a scale of 1 to 5. Following that in your packet on page 8 will be an empty chart. Do remember that before you begin the fluency intervention that you will take a baseline. So this would be whatever grade level that this student is working on, so their instructional or independent level, you'll find a baseline. So you'll want to find an ORF passage for that grade level and give that to them and record that on this monitoring chart before you even begin any intervention. Here are the oral reading rates on page 9 in your MTSS intervention document, just to see where the student should be reading, how many words per minute they should be reading. This is interesting. Some data shows us that on average, students should be improving their words per minute by only 1 or 2 words. So when you're thinking that a student should be increasing by 10 words per minute each week, it's just not appropriate. They should only be improving probably by 1 or 2 words weekly. So don't be expecting huge gains, but those small steps are typical and we consider that progress. Here are the 6 different interventions we have for fluency. Remember, you must start with a student intervention to fluency on page 11. Then after that, you can choose other Tier 2 fluency interventions in any order that you find suits the student or suits you. After completing those, and we'll talk about whether or not they're making progress, then you may continue to Tier 3 in echo reading and tracking. Although you will teach students fluency in your whole class, this 5-day plan is to be done with only targeted students who have challenges in fluency and who you have looked at their progress and also their data to see that this would be an intervention that they would need. Tier 2 fluency must start with student introduction to fluency. And on each fluency intervention, there is a goal, grouping, estimated time, and materials needed. Our goal every time is going to be that students will be able to read fluently, which means accurately, smoothly, at a good pace, and with expression, those 4 elements. You will use this only with 2nd through 5th graders in a small group or individual. It should take about 15 to 20 minutes. The materials you'll need for this intervention may vary, but will probably include information or text that we've already talked about earlier, like Harcourt text, familiar rereads, anything under the Fluency tab and reading A to Z. But do make sure that you have your materials ready before beginning the intervention and each day. With our Tier 2 Student Introduction to Fluency, you will have a 5-day plan. On day 1, you will always make sure that you have taken a baseline reading or that you have the information from the previous week's ORF passage. It should be documented on that progress monitoring chart. You'll begin every day sharing your goal for that lesson, and also at the end, you'll always talk about your follow-up goal. And so you're going to talk to the students about, did you reach your goals? You're going to do kind of a little wrap-up and making sure that students understood what you taught them that day. So that'll be on day 1. Day 2 will begin and end the same way. You'll share a goal. You'll also follow up. Oops. Day 3, share your goal. follow up on that goal at the end. Keeps wanting to skip ahead. There's day 4, share your goal, follow up. And then on day 5, you will always monitor the student's progress. And so you're going to share your goal, but then also you're going to tell the students that you're going to monitor. And so while you are working with students individually to have them read for 1 minute, you're going to have other students rereading text from that week, or they could tape themselves or listen to themselves maybe previously reading so that they are busy while you're working with the student progress monitoring. You will do that for all of the students in your group. And then remember to record it on your progress monitoring chart. And here at the end of every Tier 2 and Tier 3 lesson, they'll have how to proceed. And so on this, it says continue to any of the 3 other Tier 2 fluency interventions if the student introduction to fluency was completed with fidelity. So making sure that you completed all of the parts, everything that was included in this 5-day lesson plan. Again, here are the other interventions you could choose from. Reader's theater, paired reading, choral reading. Those are all Tier 2. We'll talk about Tier 3 here shortly. And here's how to proceed after you complete all the Tier 2 interventions with fidelity. So let's say that the student is generalizing fluency strategies in other reading opportunities, and they're averaging a 3 or above on that fluency rubric in all of those 4 elements. Then you're going to discontinue this intervention. Celebrate the fluency intervention has helped the student improve in their reading. But what if they're generalizing it in other reading opportunities, but they are still not scoring a 3 or above on their weekly progress monitoring? You will want to continue. Continue with Tier 2 fluency interventions for a few more weeks to see if the student's progress will improve to a 3 or above on that weekly progress monitoring. What if the student is not generalizing fluency interventions in other reading opportunities outside of this intervention, but they are averaging a 3 or above on those weekly progress monitoring charts? You will want to continue the fluency intervention just for a few more weeks to see if the student's fluency can improve in other reading opportunities. And finally, what if they aren't generalizing and they aren't scoring at a 3 or above? You might want to pursue a different intervention, whether it's phonics, high frequency words, or you will need to proceed to Tier 3. This would be a team decision, and you might want to discuss the student's strengths and opportunities for improvement. So here's when you begin Tier 3 fluency interventions, and there's tracking and echo reading. You'll want to do this when students have successfully completed other interventions. The student continues to read instructional level material with good word accuracy and comprehension. They've completed all Tier 2 fluency interventions with fidelity, and the student is averaging below a 3 on the weekly progress monitoring, which is using the fluency rubric, and not generalizing those strategies in other reading opportunities after 6 or more weeks of the Tier 2 fluency interventions. Remember, each student is an individual and a unique learner. Use your professional judgment when continuing or discontinuing an intervention. Collaboration teams and PLCs definitely help determine the right next steps. Tier 3 is set up just like the Tier 2 interventions. You'll have a goal, grouping, estimated time, and materials needed. The difference is this is going to be pretty much a one-on-one situation with students who are really struggling. You would start with echo reading before you move on to tracking. Finally, on page 30 in your MTSS intervention document, it will tell you what to do after completing both Tier 2 and Tier 3 fluency interventions with fidelity. So you've completed all 4 of those Tier 2, and also echo reading and tracking. It will tell you when to discontinue and when to continue Tier 3. Again, it's talking about whether the students are generalizing their skills and averaging a 3 or above or below a 3 on that weekly progress monitoring, and also whether they can generalize those skills to other reading opportunities. Thank you for taking this time to learn more about the Fluency intervention and understanding how we can help students read better and improve all areas of their reading.